Well, hello there, Space Monkeys. Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden, and we're doing our Power Rankings episode today, our monthly Power Rankings, and you guys can probably guess we're going to be ranking my favorite writers and journalists who are doing great work recently. And like normal here, I'm going to cite all my sources. I'm going to tell you guys why I ranked these people and why they're in such order. We're going to do the top 5 and then a couple of honorable mentions. And I highly recommend you go and subscribe to these people. They're doing fantastic work, particularly the number one. I'll tell you about him. He's basically been working around the clock doing just raking lately when it comes to Assange and foreign policy. There's no one better, so you're going to want to stick around to the end here. And I like doing these episodes because I like promoting and protecting my journalists. That's kind of my thing. But also, I think it's important that you guys know who I'm watching, where I'm getting my information from. That gives you guys an idea of what kind of commentator I am, and I like to cite my sources. So let's start with the 2 honorable mentions here. And these people are doing very similar work, and that's why I'm ranking them as honorable mentions. We're going to mention Matt Taibbi, who did a really great article on his Substack called Orwell Was Right, where he's comparing like what's going on nowadays with the surveillance state in World War III with 1984, which is great. It's a great article. I highly recommend. And if you guys know anything, if you've been around PFC for a while, I read a lot of The Divide by Matt Taibbi on this show. Fantastic book. He's done other books that are great as well. I always like Matt Taibbi. He's also making his rounds on other shows on YouTube right now, which has been great. I will link those below. And then the other honorable mention is Caitlin Johnstone, who I rank perennially. She's a fantastic writer, but specifically, I want to point out a couple of videos and articles she's written recently, including one that came out today called It's Not Okay for Grown Adults to Think This Way About Ukraine, where she basically goes through how it's so naive and juvenile to think of this war in Ukraine as completely black and white, and Putin is entirely evil, and Zelensky is just this, he's handsome and brave, and everybody loves him, you know, that Stephen King style tweeting bullshit about how he's obviously the good guy here and Putin's obviously the bad guy. All of that stuff is completely naive, and it's ridiculous for adults to think about war that way. She did a great article and great video on that. She also did one yesterday called The Awesome Power of Propaganda. So, and she's always doing good work. She's hilarious. She's extremely good writer. So I highly recommend you sub to her YouTube and her Substack as well. I will link all of that below. Now, let's get to the heavy hitters, the top 5, working our way up from 5 to 1. 5 is going to be Chris Hedges. And I've ranked him number 1 before. He is fantastically talented. You guys know who he is. And of course, he now is he's no longer able to put things on RT, which he used to do on contact on RT. RT's gone now. So let's promote him. I will link his website below, but particularly, this is SheerPost, by the way. That's where he writes. He wrote a great article called Waltzing Toward Armageddon with the Merchants of Death. That came out a couple of days ago on March 14th. But particularly, the one that I really liked was Worthy and Unworthy Victims, which came out on March 7th, which talks about, I believe it's Chomsky's idea that, like, the United States and NATO can bomb certain areas in the world, and if they are worthy victims, like the people that we kill in Syria or Somalia, that Americans don't really care because those are worthy victims. But then they get up all in a huff when people in Ukraine get killed by Russians. Those are unworthy victims. And it's a great article. And it's weird that we have this weird dichotomy in the way that we think in America, where it's like we'll get all up in a huff when certain people that are generally white people get bombed. But if brown and black people get bombed, we don't really give a damn. And that's by design. He breaks it down. It's a fantastic article. So Chris Hedges is number 5, but he's one of the best journalists alive. One of the best journalists alive. I love his work and all of his books. Highly recommend. So I'll link that below. Number 4 is Lee Camp, who is obviously a comedian. He just had his shows taken off of Spotify and also RT, so he was, out of a job last week. He's a wonderful writer. Highly recommend you check out his website, radindiemedia.com, which collects a whole bunch of videos and articles from all over the internet. It's a great place, a one-stop shop for, finding great articles. I use it all the time. And he also is hilarious. He's got Moment of Clarity still going on YouTube, but Redacted Tonight has been completely wiped off the face of the map. And it's unfortunate, but luckily PFC, like all of the indie news channels have been picking up Lee and bringing him on to tell his story about what happened with RT and where they can find his work. I highly recommend you sub to everything that he does. He's doing a Patreon now, so I highly recommend you sub to his Patreon, flip him some bucks. He's out of work ever since RT went down, and it makes no goddamn sense for him not to have his voice heard, because he tells it like it is. He's hilarious. You know, one of my heroes, because he's a comedian that also does the news, similar to me. So Lee Camp is number 4. Go out and give him a sub. Go to his Patreon, and go to radindiemedia.com if you want to find a great compilation of great articles and videos. All right, number 3 is a tie, and there's a reason there's a tie at number 3. It's going to be Alex Rubinstein and Max Blumenthal. And the reason that I'm giving them a tie is because the 2 articles that I will be going over in a video later today were written by them both. Okay, one of them's from the Gray Zone, talking about how Ukraine's Jewish president Zelensky made peace with neo-Nazi paramilitaries on front lines of war with Russia. That came out at the beginning of March, on March 4th. But then I also would like to go over an article that they put out on Mint Press News, which I actually had saved on my computer because it was so good. It talks about Pierre Omidyar, the owner of The Intercept, the billionaire, and how he promoted surveillance. It came out in Mint Press News in 2019. That again was Alexander Rubinstein and Max Blumenthal. They do great work on their own, but these 2 articles I'm going to be showcasing later on in an episode that I'll probably put it on YouTube. If I go off the rails and talk about some things I can't talk about on YouTube, I'll put it on Rockfin and Rumble. So that's a 2-way tie at number 3. And then let's go on to the real heavy hitters. Glenn Greenwald is number 2. And I just showcased him in an episode like a day or 2 ago. But as it turns out, news came out yesterday that the story about Hunter Biden's emails, that laptop story that was completely censored from the New York Post right before the Trump and Biden election, now the New York Times is admitting that that was a true story, which that makes me laugh because I got dragged like crazy for talking about that on the General Strike Summit and making my video about it. And as usual, I'm vindicated. So is Glenn Greenwald. And, you know, are the people that were smearing people like me and Glenn ever going to apologize? Are they ever going to admit that they were wrong? This isn't like something that we just found out. And I'm going to do an episode on this later on today as well. This will not be on YouTube. It'll be on Rockfin. About how we've always known that that was a true story. They smeared it as Russian propaganda to sway an election, is what they did. And now they're admitting, oh yeah, well, even the New York Times is admitting that, yeah, that's a legitimate story, but we already know because of Ben Schreckinger's book that it was legit. So all they did was they stifled it to try to help Biden win the election, which he did do, and now they're kind of like quietly through the back door kind of admitting that it is true, and it always was. So what I draw from this is that you guys should pick your sources based on how often they have to do this. I would much rather listen to Glenn Greenwald talk about this stuff than the New York Times. That's just me. So Glenn, I ranked him recently because he's been destroying propaganda left and right, but I want to help him promote even further now because this evidence came out yesterday that he was right, he's vindicated, and all the people that went out there, I think it was like Andy Stone, a whole bunch of fucking people went out there and smeared Glenn Greenwald for this, and he's right. They owe him an apology. I was also right. I didn't get smeared as much as Glenn because I don't have as big a following as Glenn. But, you know, I don't expect an apology either. It would be nice, though, because these people are constantly wrong, and they constantly go after people like me and Glenn, and it would be nice for them to, like, retract and, like, vocally come out publicly and be like, yeah, you know what? Sorry about that. Sorry. Yeah, we were wrong. So we'll do a full episode on that on Rockfin later today. Glenn is ranked number 2. And then number 1, this guy is number 1 by a long shot, Richie Medhurst. Richard Medhurst is doing round-the-clock coverage on Ukraine, which is his wheelhouse. He's great on foreign policy. He also is doing a lot of coverage on Julian Assange and how Assange was denied his appeal to the Supreme Court for extradition to the United States, which is something I also need to do a little bit more research on, and I've learned a little bit more about what's going on from Richard Medhurst. But, I mean, my man is making, like, 6 to 7 hour live streams. He's uploading daily. and all of his articles are great. The transcripts of his articles are also up on his website, so he is unequivocally the #1 ranked. And I really highly recommend you go and sub to his YouTube channel and his Substack. He is just raking everything that comes his way. He's hitting it out of the park right now. Everything. He even did a great video on how now Germany is breaking their neutrality to basically side with NATO, which no one else has reported on that. That is very scary, because that means that now the U.S. and Germany are on the same side supporting basically the Azov battalion in Ukraine. And if that isn't scary to people, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. So that's a great video that came out, and the transcript is also on his website. Richard Medhurst, he's doing great work. He's a young guy. He works out of the UK. He's a Syrian. Highly recommend a sub, and I will link all of his stuff below. So, in summation, guys, these people definitely need your subs. Please go out and check them out. Caitlin Johnstone, Matt Taibbi, Chris Hedges, Lee Camp, Alex Rubenstein, Max Blumenthal, Glenn Greenwald, and Richard Medhurst. They are all doing fabulous work, and a couple of them, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I will be showcasing later on my show. Actually, probably all of them at some point over the next week. So, keep fighting the good fight out there, guys. That's a lot of the people that I've been reading and listening to lately, and I think you should too. But, you know, you don't have to take my word for it. Make your own decisions. But in a day and age where we have a hard time finding people that are giving you both sides of the story and are doing not just, you know, educational and well-researched journalism, but they're also kind of entertaining people. The way they write, the way they do their shows is going to keep your attention. So it's not like some snooze fest. You'll actually learn something, and these people have great personalities, and they're doing fantastic work across the board. So I highly recommend just giving them all a sub. Keep fighting that good fight. I'll talk to you guys later.